Good afternoon. National Assembly for Wales is now in session, and the first item this afternoon, questions to the First Minister. Question 1, Clear Griffith.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Will the First Minister make a statement on reforms to the Common Agricultural Policy?
The Minister for Natural Resources and Food made a statement on his decisions on direct payments for farmers on the 14th of January.
Thank you, First Minister. Now, the Minister did make that statement on transferring 15% in a letter to a committee chair in the Assembly rather than to a statement here in the Senedd or in a written statement. And the reforms and amendments were made also without us being aware of the result of the resilience review conducted by Kevin Roberts. It was also done without knowing what the government's intention was in terms of the rural development plan. And now Welsh farmers have received quite a brief letter, according to the response that I've seen, that the value of their entitlements have to fall by around a quarter. Do you think it's about time that the Welsh Government apologise for the insulting way in which you've treated Welsh farmers?
Not at all. We have an excellent record in the way we treat Welsh farmers, and we ensure that we have a sustainable industry economically for the future, and that's the outcome of the statements made by the Minister.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, we know that all European countries agreed a 13% cut to the CAP budget. However, your government has decided to disadvantage Welsh farmers by implementing the maximum transfer of 15% from Pillar 1 to Pillar 2. First Minister, do you accept that other European countries have lower pillar transfer rates than Wales? England 12%, Scotland 9.5%, Northern Ireland 0%, France 3% and Germany 4.5%, and that this puts Welsh farmers at a competitive disadvantage at a time when average farm business income in Wales fell by 30%?
Well, first of all, of course, this is not money lost to farming. It's simply being accessed in a different way through Pillar 2. Secondly, of course, I believe it is in the longer-term interest of Welsh farmers to do this. Those countries who do not put more money aside for rural development will see their farming industry decline slowly over time. In Wales, we are investing in farms to make sure they are more sustainable. Economically, that is not being done in other countries, and it should.
Alan Roberts.
Prif Weinidog.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, you talk about over-dependency on grants, but what worries us is the nature of moving from one system to another, where the farmers of Wales will be disadvantaged in the way that they'll be able to compete with countries such as Ireland. Was that part of the consideration when the Minister made his statement?
Well, once again, the impression is being given that this is funding that's been lost to Welsh farmers. That isn't the case. It's still available, but of course it will be used in a different way and will be used to ensure the sustainability of farmers in the long term, and I think that is the wise way to move forward.
Question 2, Jonathan Saunders.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Will the First Minister make a statement on publicising Welsh Government targets for inward investment?
Yes, our target for this year is 8,500 new and safeguarded jobs.
First Minister, during the Welsh Conservative debate last week on our inward investment proposals, Destination Cymru, your Economy Minister stated that we do have clear targets. My officials have clear targets. Can you confirm that there really are indeed targets? And if there are, why are you not publishing them?
I just said so. I don't know if the member heard the answer, but I've just given the answer that she's asked to the question that she asked. It's on the record.
Have you finished?
The question was, why are you not publishing them?
I didn't ask you to ask him another question. I asked you to be quiet. Alan Fred Jones.
Well, I'll ask the question then. Have you published the targets for inward investment in Wales?
Well, we know, of course, that inward investment has increased by up to 200% over the past year, and we want to ensure that that growth continues for the future.
We now move to questions from the party leaders, and first this afternoon we have the Leader of the Opposition, Andrew Davis.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, I've asked you many times about enterprise zones, and sadly I've been increasingly disappointed by the response that I and others are getting. The Finance Committee here in the Assembly said in their report that there was something of a mystery about the enterprise zones that the government have brought forward. We support the concept of enterprise zones here on this side of the House, but sadly, time and time again, when you're trying to understand what impact they are making to the economy of Wales, in job creation and investment made, it is becoming increasingly impossible to try and find this data out. Why are you being so evasive as to the measures that need to be put in place to see whether enterprise zones are a success or not?
Well, they are a success. We know that 2,000 jobs have been created or safeguarded. We know, for example, that 30 firms have had their applications approved in terms of financial support. And we know, of course, that when compared to the enterprise zones in England, they're far more successful, given the fact that we know that in England, only 1/10 of the jobs have been created that were originally planned.
Well, in England, for example, since you brought it up, First Minister, I can talk about 250 new businesses you've created, £1.1 billion worth of private sector investment, and over 7,000 local jobs created. What we do know in Wales is that, sadly, people are actually pulling out of the enterprise zones. Manchester Airport, for example, have just withdrawn their advertisements from the Deeside enterprise zone because they don't believe it's commercially viable. They don't. You have not chosen to actually exercise any local development orders which would assist the planning process in those enterprise zones, something which many businesses say are one of the biggest obstacles they find when planning new investment, is the planning process. How confident are you that at the end of this Assembly term, your government will be able to say enterprise zones here in Wales have been a success and have created the new jobs that we require here in Wales?
Well, I mean, 2,000 jobs in Wales, 7,000 in England. Compared to the populations, that's pretty good going. And should have done his work in terms of Manchester Airport. What actually happened was the advert was there for Deeside Enterprise Zone in Manchester Airport, not an advert in Deeside Enterprise Zone. We paid for the advert for Deeside Enterprise Zone to be put up in the airport, and there was some in the airport that took exception to it. But nevertheless, we did actually pay for it. But if that's an example of somebody pulling out of an enterprise zone, I fail to see how that works when we paid for the advert to go to Manchester Airport, not the other way around.
I think what it shows is a lack of confidence in the offer that you are having for enterprise zones. And I did ask you, are you confident about the success of enterprise zones here in Wales? If I take Snowdonia Enterprise Zone, for example, the response that we've had about Snowdonia Enterprise Zone is, and I quote, Snowdonia Enterprise Zone has not yet completed being developed sufficiently to attract investment. In other words, nothing has gone in there. How on earth can you be confident, after 2.5 years of enterprise zones existing in Wales, that we are not seeing the progress that you've initially promised, and above all, trying to find out how these enterprise zones will progress is like wading through treacle, First Minister?
Well, what we do know is that he doesn't know what he's talking about and he's trying to bluff his way loudly out of it, which is the normal approach that we get from the leader of the opposition. Coming back, of course, to the point that I made in terms of the jobs safeguarded and created. It's true to say that Deeside is easier in terms of attracting investment at this moment in time than Snowdonia. Historically, that's been the case, and Snowdonia needs more work. But nevertheless, we have created the enterprise zone in Snowdonia. You can bet your bottom dollar the UK government would never have done that because it had been too hard. You know, let's only look at the areas that are easy the UK government's approach would have been. But if you look at all the figures with regard to enterprise zones in Wales, whether it's jobs created, jobs safeguarded, or in terms of businesses that are receiving support, Wales is doing, once again, better than England.
We now move to the leader of the Welsh Liberal Democrats, Kirsty Williams.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, as you know, Vince Cable and the Liberal Democrats have been pushing the idea of a mansion tax on properties over £2 million, which was today described as punitive by the Tories. Now, First Minister, I know that we don't always see eye to eye in this chamber, but would you agree with me that Andrew R.T. Davies's concerns to protect super-rich property owners in the southeast of England are misplaced?
Not surprised, but clearly I'm concerned, and it is unusual for me to be asked to comment on something somebody else has said, but clearly from what the Conservatives have been saying is they object strongly to something that doesn't actually exist in Wales. that they say that the mansion tax is a disincentive to investment, even though we know that there are no houses in Wales that have been sold for more than £2 million. Again, an example of completely confused thinking, not thinking things through, another example of which we saw in the chamber earlier on.
Well, First Minister, if we could move from the concerns of the super-rich in England to the concerns of ordinary parents in Wales. Last year, your colleague and former Labour Cabinet Minister Alan Milburn said in his social mobility report that too little attention is paid to a child's first 5 years, and that pupil premium should be extended to all eligible nursery pupils. Has your government carried out an assessment of the benefits of extending the pupil deprivation grant to under 5s here in Wales?
No, we haven't, of course. The pupil deprivation grant was something that was agreed between ourselves as parties as part of budget negotiations, and the PDG has been continued, but there have been no plans to extend it to nursery at this stage, and no costings have been done.
His report, he also highlighted the stark difference between pupils in England and Wales, and he noted that at the age of 5, the poorest pupils here in Wales were already falling behind their counterparts in England. First Minister, to extend the pupil premium to under 5s in Wales would actually cost £10 million and could make a real difference to the life chances of our most disadvantaged young people. Don't you agree with me that this could indeed make a real difference at a relatively small cost, and would finally give a good news story for Welsh education and show that Wales was leading the way?
Well, sadly, no cost is small these days, but certainly it is an issue, no doubt, that the Education Minister may well look to consider in the future. But again, we have to bear in mind the fact that that money is not easy to find at this moment in time. Nevertheless, I'm sure these are matters that can be discussed, bearing in mind, of course, the current financial situation. But I take the point that she makes that we have PDG, of course, for other pupils. There may be a case for extending it to nursery pupils. That will have to be assessed, and of course the financial situation evaluated.
Ac yn ôl arweinydd Blaid Cymru, Liam Wood.
Diolch Llywydd. First Minister, have your officials made an assessment as to the full impact of the bedroom tax in this country? Yesterday, your party decided to support the Scottish National Party's budget in Scotland, which could lead to the effective abolition of the bedroom tax there. Can you tell us how much would it cost us to replicate that policy here in Wales?
Based on the Scottish experience, somewhere along the lines of 10 million.
Thank you, First Minister. The Scottish Government is requesting that Westminster lift the cap on discretionary housing payments so that the bedroom tax shortfall can be made up through that mechanism. If successful, the DHP could also be used in Wales to make up the shortfall of the bedroom tax here. Will the Welsh Government be joining the calls from the Scottish Government to lift that cap?
Well, first of all, we haven't done that so far because even if such a cap were to be lifted, we do not have the funds to fund it. I think probably 8 to 10 million is probably a more accurate assessment, but nevertheless it's still a substantial amount of money. And of course there's the issue of why devolved government should be paying for what is the responsibility for non-devolved government. And there's a sense of hazard there, of course. In Scotland at the moment, for reasons that we all know, the Scottish Government is promising everything and anything in terms of finance without identifying where that money is actually coming from. But my view is the bedroom tax is iniquitous, and she will agree, I know, with that, and it is something that should be scrapped at GB level and not something that should be forced as an extra cost on Scotland and Wales.
First Minister, you have an opportunity to do something about something that is seriously impacting on many people right throughout Wales. Another way to address the shortfall, of course, would be through the reform of the Barnett formula. That would result in at least an additional £300 million to the Welsh budget. This is something now that you've made a condition of your support for the devolution of income tax powers. You've yet to give a commitment from your party to reform Barnett should you win the UK general election in 2015. And when you had the chance to do it last time, you didn't take it. So why should people have any faith that you will do it next time? You have an opportunity here this afternoon, First Minister, to give me a straight answer on this. Would a Labour government in 2015 reform the Barnett formula and introduce fair funding for Wales? Yes or no?
It's my strong view that fair funding should be introduced, and I would want my party to to do exactly that
Yes,
in terms of the general election from 2015. We're not in disagreement over that. We all know that fair funding is important. We all know that Barnet has a limited shelf life, but also it's worth emphasising, of course, that it's not just to do with Wales. That's why it's important that fair funding is looked at from the perspective of the whole UK, and we know the situation in Wales in the future. And so there is no disagreement, I believe, between herself and myself. We both say that there is a need to examine fair funding in the future and make sure Wales is properly funded, particularly, of course, in accordance with the evidence we've seen from the Holton Commission.
We now move back to questions on the paper. And question 3, Mark Isherwood.
Will the Minister outline his policies for economic growth in Wales?
They're in the programme for government.
Thank you. Well, given the latest GVA figures showing that Wales remains bottom in terms of wealth creation, value of goods and services produced amongst the 12 UK nations and regions, and figures showing that the Welsh Government was only involved in 5 new companies coming to Wales last year, how do you respond to the several lost inward investors into North Wales who have written to me that saying following engagement with the Welsh Government they've taken the decision not to proceed, e.g. the manufacturer who said last summer we've been totally disillusioned by the performance of the Welsh Government, having both suffered heavy costs in terms of time, money and loss of revenue?
I have no idea who they are. Unless you're prepared to name them, I can't answer your question. That's the problem with unsolicited letters in this way. What I can tell you is you can talk to Tata if you want, you can talk to Airbus if you want, you can talk to GE if you want, you can talk to any number of companies across Wales who will tell you how much they appreciate what the Welsh Government has done for them. You will see from the inward investment figures, 191% increase, what effect we have had as a Welsh Government to bring investment into Wales. You will see the level of unemployment in Wales is at the UK average. You will see that the level of youth unemployment for those between 18 and 24 is way lower than the UK average. You will see that through our anchor companies, that those companies are very, very happy with the aftercare policy they lifted from us and then tried to disguise it as their own. That we give them. So the reality of the situation is the vast majority of companies who are in Wales, who are looking to come to Wales, are very happy with the support they receive from Welsh Government. And if he is willing to provide with details of this company, then of course we might be able to comment. But I have no idea whether this company exists, what the truth of the allegations are. He does this every time. But the reality is he's never going to get an answer unless he provides more details. But I know, looking at the figures in terms of unemployment and the economy, looking at the response we get from investors who are already in Wales, that they know the Welsh Government provides an excellent service.
Mick Anthony.
First Minister, will you welcome the remarkable and very, very positive progress that's being made on apprenticeships within Wales, where the completion of apprenticeships within Wales is at 85% compared to the English average of 74%. But equally importantly, of those at level 3 apprenticeship, within Wales the average being 90% going on to get full-time employment, and in Pontypridd, my constituency, the actual success rate in achieving employment is a remarkable 97%.
Well, I mean, looking at Jobs Growth Wales as an example, on the 10th of January we created 10,594 job opportunities, and 8,354 young people were in employment through Jobs Growth Wales. So our early progression figures in the programme show that 80% of the young people in the private sector strand, for example, who completed the 6-month opportunity are making a positive move into employment, an apprenticeship or higher learning. I suspect those are the best figures of any such scheme anywhere in Europe, if not the world.
Thank
you very much, Presiding Officer. We welcome the fact that your government is now committed to looking at the idea put forward by ourselves for some time of establishing a bank for Wales. The broad-ranging research that proves the need for an investment bank of that kind. Now, discussion and consultation without giving a real commitment to act has become quite a prominent characteristic of the way in which your government operates. Can you personally give us a guarantee that you will support the establishment of an investment bank of this kind for Wales?
Well, of course, this is something which has been considered by the Minister, and it's something which is under detailed consideration at present. Anything that can be done, of course, to assist businesses in Wales to access funding is to be welcomed, bearing in mind, of course, that we have to be careful in ensuring that we establish a sustainable bank. Everybody understands that. The Minister's given her view on this.
Parrott.
First Minister, Wales's brand strategy is crucial to growth, particularly when it comes to attracting inward investment and exporting. However, notwithstanding the Just Ask Wales campaign, several key stakeholders have told the Enterprise and Business Committee recently that they don't know what Wales's brand strategy now is. Do you have a current brand strategy for Wales? And if so, will you publish it so that all of those people who are concerned with selling Wales abroad can sing from the same hymn sheet and present a coherent and consistent message to the world?
Yes and yes are the answers to those questions. And indeed, if you look at the advertising campaigns that we are running, you will see, and we're looking now at running adverts on the London Underground, you will see that we have marketed a particular brand as far as Wales is concerned, a brand that concentrates, if I may put it this way, on a small country that does things well. I think that is where we should place ourselves in terms of the rest of the world.
Christian Chapman.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, young people disengaged from education, employment or training has held back economic growth and cost billions yearly, and it also costs young people. And I do welcome the recent work your government has done around the early identification of those at risk. As the early identification guidance recognises, this then relies on the work of partners such as Youth Services, Schools and Careers Wales, and I am concerned that current budgetary constraints may impact on ability to deliver. How will we ensure that this isn't the case, and how else will the success of these initiatives be measured?
Well, if we look, for example, at Jobs Growth Wales, that's already been mentioned in terms of its success. But another example, the Youth and Entrepreneurship Strategy. For example, we know that recent studies show that 53% of young people under 25 now have entrepreneurial aspirations, 9% up from 2004. And the number of young people starting up in business has also tripled since 2004 and is higher than the UK average. On top of that, of course, we are working with organisations such as the Prince's Trust to support unemployed and disadvantaged young people aged between 18 and 30 to consider if their business ideas are viable and whether self-employment is right for them. I believe that with a number of young people who are neat at the moment, that they have potential to set up their own businesses. They have good ideas. They just need the support in order to do that. And I believe that using the youth entrepreneurship strategy and also, of course, the working with organisations such as the Prince's Trust, we can deliver that.
Question 4, Sandy Moyes.
So, First Minister, will you provide an update on the Fresh Start Wales campaign to make cars smoke-free when children are travelling as passengers?
Well, recent campaign research shows the percentage of people reporting that smoking wasn't allowed in their main car has increased to 78%. Those figures also showed that around 90% of respondents agreed that second-hand smoke can harm health and that parents should not smoke in their cars. The member, of course, will have knowledge of the studies that are taking place, which will inform any future decision.
As you say, there are new figures, but they still indicate that a disappointingly 22% of people say they'll continue to allow smoking in their cars under any circumstance. If that figure is correct, it's clear that perhaps the dangers of exposing children to second-hand smoke just aren't getting through. So, First Minister, can you outline the timescale for considering legislation and implementing a ban on smoking in cars when children are present?
Well, Cardiff University was commissioned to carry out a study of primary school-age children's exposure to second-hand smoke. That data will be collected in the spring of this year. The results will be available in the summer of this year. And then, of course, dependent on those results, a decision will be taken as to whether to move ahead with the ban or not.
Thank you. William Graham.
First Minister, in view of your earlier replies, would you help identify and publicise key messages regarding the dangers of smoking in cars with children present, and the toxic mixture of chemicals released by smoking remain in the vehicle's upholstery, clearly even when the children are not in the car and they're exposed to that, and that opening the car window does not disperse these chemicals?
Well, the Fresh Start campaign, of course, has emphasised the risks. That will run until March. There has been a large amount of promotional activity. Some 31,000 packs have been distributed, and of course members will be aware that Fresh Start Wales sponsored the ITV Wales Weather, S4C Weather and Scorio during the period of between autumn of 2012 until August 2013. So a number of outlets have been used in order to promote the campaign, and we await, of course, the results of the university's research in the spring, with a view, in the summer rather, with a view then to taking a decision as swiftly as possible.
Jocelyn Davis.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, it's a little while since I asked you about banning smoking in cars where children are passengers. Since then, I've heard from a number of people, obviously who fall in the 22% who think it's okay to continue smoking with their children in the car. They oppose the ban, arguing that their car is their private sphere and governments shouldn't intervene. Do you think adults have a right to damage their children even in their private sphere?
Well, in terms of smoke, of course, where people wish to smoke in their own cars, on their own, that is, of course, a matter for them. But where children are in the car, then, of course, that second-hand smoke damages the health of children who have no choice in the matter. And that is the difference between banning smoking in cars full stop and banning smoking in cars where children are present. And that's why, of course, it's so important for us to see what the results are of the survey and ultimately, of course, to take action if it is needed.
Question 5, William Powell.
Diolch yn fawr, Llywydd. Will the First Minister please make a statement on rail services in Mid and West Wales?
Well, our priorities are ensuring that we have a transport infrastructure that improves economic competitiveness and, of course, provides enhanced access to jobs in all parts of Wales.
I'd like to thank the First Minister very much for that answer. Along with colleagues around this chamber, I've been campaigning hard for the delivery of the hourly service on the Cambrian line, and I very much hope that that will be coming forward in the near future. But one aspect that's sometimes forgotten is the potential impact that enhanced service could have on those who own and farm land on either side of the line. And in that context, just last week, I met a farmer from Llanbryn Mair who currently has to wait 20 minutes before any approaching train in terms of crossing the line with either machinery or indeed with livestock. And in that context, First Minister, will you please ensure that working in partnership with the relevant authorities, those business people and communities which are split by the line are not adversely affected and that sufficient resource is put aside to ensure that the necessary infrastructure is fully supplied?
It's an interesting point, of course. I can say that the Cambrian Rail Implementation Group was set up to look at the recommendations of the demand surveys that took place up to the 27th of November. That group's report is being considered at the moment, but the issue of those who cross the line, I'm sure, will be considered as part of the process of looking to get to a situation where the service is more regular.
Keith Davis.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, our infrastructure, including rail services, have a crucial role in promoting tourism, and I welcome the progress in tourist figures and the increase, particularly as related spend is up almost 12%. The Heart of Wales rail line has made the case for having a scenic route during the summer months, something that they have raised with the Minister for the Economy. Would you be willing to consider how such initiatives using our rail services could promote tourism in West Wales?
Well, of course, it's an extremely interesting initiative. I'm not aware of any financial bid that has been submitted to date, but it's a great attraction and brings many people into the area between Llanelli and Shrewsbury. A very interesting idea, but as regards any commitment on funding, it would have to be considered through the appropriate channels.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, I recently met with volunteers and key organisers of the Gwili Railway Company. They've undertaken some fantastic work, in fact, to ensure the railway between Carmarthen North and Llanpimpsaint has a future. With their most recent extension to the line, they'll be able to provide improved facilities for travellers, and they are, however, desperately in need of significant car park extensions. Will you look at what assistance the Welsh Government can give to assist in securing land and necessary grants or funding available for this development?
I'm sure I'll be able to discuss it with them because I am, in fact, opening the extension.
Gavin Ellis-Thomas.
Thank you, Dame Presiding Officer. The First Minister will be well aware of the Cambrian coastline and the great damage that has occurred due to recent storms. Will the First Minister ensure, on behalf of the Welsh Government, that there is full collaboration on all occasions between Network Rail, which is the main safeguarder in terms of coastal flooding for miles of that line, and we hope to meet with them next Friday. Will he ensure that there is collaboration between them and Natural Resources Wales and all other stakeholders to ensure that the flood defences and flood risk defences are coordinated along that coastline clearly and safely?
Well, I believe that's a completely sensible thing to do in order to reduce the risk in future. May I say, as regards the railroad, the hope is that part of the railroad between Dyfi Junction and Barmouth will be open next Monday, and that the remainder of the line from there to Pwllheli will be open by mid-May. That is the schedule that has been given to us by Network Rail, and we hope, of course, that that will happen as soon as possible in order to ensure that people can use the trains once more.
Question 6, Kirsty Williams.
Will the First Minister make a statement on the future of farming in the moorlands of Brecon and Radnorshire?
Well, the actions recommended to ensure a sustainable future for farming in the moorlands have recently been published by the Kevin Roberts Review, and of course we will continue to support mechanisms through the CAP to support upland farmers.
First Minister, the decisions already announced by your Agricultural Minister will have a devastating effect on the incomes of family farms in the Elan Valley. To give an illustration, one farm will see a 79% loss in their income, another 69%, and another 76%. That's pretty typical of the situation in the valley. Now, contrary to the stereotypes I often hear from members behind you, these aren't asset-rich fat cats sitting on a lot of land. These are tenant farmers who are trying to eke out a living in some of the most difficult and inhospitable places to farm in Wales. What confidence can they have that any yet-to-be-announced schemes under Pillar 2 will secure their and their families' futures in the Elan Valley?
Well, we are aware, of course, of the situation that faces and has always faced Welsh farming, namely that without the subsidies, Welsh farming simply isn't viable. It needs subsidies in order to survive. That is something I knew full well in my 6 years as a minister responsible. But that doesn't mean it should be like that forever. And that's why it's important that where we look at securing extra money to make farms more viable in the longer term, that money is made available. The CAP budget will reduce. There's no question of that over the next 5, 10, 15 years. There will be less money available to support farmers. It makes perfect sense then for us to be able to provide the financial resources for farms to become more self-sufficient than they are now, because the number of farms, as we know, they wouldn't exist if they were conventional businesses. So I understand the point in terms of support, but it's also important that there's sufficient resource available to help them become sustainable businesses in the future.
Antoinette Sandbach.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, the Vice Chairman of the Farmers Union of Wales Marginal Land Committee said this: we've gone from a system where we had LFA payments which were administered fairly and easily to a system where farmers have to jump through hoop after hoop after hoop. It has gone from a very simple system to one which is very complicated and restricts production. Meanwhile, our main competitors in Scotland and Ireland still receive LFA payments without hoops or restrictions. First Minister, will you and your government commit to removing those hoops and restrictions and look at an ANC scheme that can benefit the farmers, particularly above the moorland line?
Historically, we have provided very good support to farmers in the DA and the SDA. It is slightly odd, because if this is any other sphere of business, the Conservatives would be saying you need to make sure when you give money out that there are controls over that money. But with farming, it's the complete opposite. Now, I don't think that's in farming's interest to do that. I think it's important. What she describes as hoops. The reality is that where public money is distributed, it's absolutely fair that there are controls over how that money is distributed. That is perfect common sense. And the reality of the situation is, I know full well, as will Alan Davis speaking, to her party in London, they couldn't give a monkeys about the LFA. They're only interested in large arable farmers. They're only interested in the very large farms in the lowlands of England. And that is something I've come across in the past. I know Alan Davis has come across in the past. So I know full well that if her party were in charge, they have no interest at all in small family farms. They are in hock to the very large farms that don't exist in Wales. So I take no lessons to the Conservatives. I've seen the way they operate at European level and the fact they have no interest whatsoever in small family farms, particularly in the uplands of Wales. We will always make sure that we have a fair settlement for our farmers in Wales, and that has always been the case.
Simon Thomas.
Diolch, Llywydd. Prif Weinidog.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, I believe that there is a future for the moorland farmers, and I've seen some of that future in visiting the launch of the Pwllheuyn Research Centre with the Minister last week. But at the moment, those responsible for those lands, particularly that's essentially the farmers, are facing cuts in their subsidies and haven't seen the government's vision in terms of what's going to replacement, what's going to appear under Pillar 2 and what's going to be included in the RDP. Can you today give a signal to those farmers as to the kind of future you see them playing in maintaining our moorlands for farming and for the clean water that we require?
Well, that's exceptionally important, and it's exceptionally important that farmers understand that the money will revert to farming, but you have to do something to get that funding. I mean, that's true about Pillar 2, and it's also true to say that farmers have a crucial role as regards the way in which they work the land and the way, of course, that they ensure that less water goes into the rivers. We've been dealing with floods. I've seen it myself. And also on land management. The problem previously was there were too many sheep. Many sheep were being kept that nobody wanted to buy, and therefore all the prices came tumbling down. And that was not in the interest of any farmers, but it is important that the farmers understand the contents of the Rural Development Plan, and the Minister will ensure that there is full understanding of where the money will be going as regards Pillar 2.
Russell George.
Will the First Minister make a statement on the Welsh Government's policies to develop renewable energy in Wales?
Yes, they're in Energy Wales, a low-carbon transition.
Thank you, First Minister. It was disappointing to read the Anifro mid-term review, which stated that it was unlikely to achieve its ambitious targets for energy generation and job creation by the end of the programme in 2015. One of the key challenges highlighted in the review was the difficulties in obtaining planning permission and consent from local planning authorities and Natural Resources Wales, being perceived as being resistant to community energy, renewable energy, and the benefits to the community. The Minister for Natural Resources often tells us that NRW is enabling, but in this circumstance, it seems there's a difference of opinion here. I wonder if you could comment on who is right.
It's clear to me that local planning authorities are turning down a large number of planning applications for renewable energy. As far as NRW are concerned, they must make assessments when they are asked to make those assessments. But it's also true to say, of course, that the vast majority of planning applications, all large planning applications, sit outside the purview of Welsh Government. This is a problem that we know has been the case for many, since the Assembly was set up. And I know the view of his own party on this, as well as mine. But I would encourage local planning authorities to look very carefully at the community benefits that can accrue, and the register is very important in that regard, when renewable energy projects are set up in their area. It's not a case of nothing being made available to local people. There's a substantial financial dividend. He will know in his own constituency in Carno, of course, of how important that is to people who live in that area. And I would urge local planning authorities to consider the register of community benefits and make sure that they do seek to get the fullest community benefit from planning applications as they consider them.
Claire Griffith.
Diolch, Llywydd. Scotland has a target, of course, of generating the equivalent of 100% of its electricity consumption from renewable energy by 2020. What's your target?
Well, you know that our target is lower than that, and you'll know that the reason for that is that we don't have full control over energy resources and in terms of energy consents. He will know, and I've said this many, many times in the chamber, that we want to see a situation where we are not disadvantaged when compared to Scotland and Northern Ireland, particularly with regard to energy consents and particularly with regard to the subsidy system. The reality is that Scotland can throw money at marine energy projects, despite the fact that circumstances they are less promising than Wales, because they control the level of subsidy. They're in a position, in effect, where their level of subsidy is paid for by English consumers, which is a very happy place to be if you're Scotland. We don't have that. And that's why it's so crucial that we have energy consents devolved in the same way as Scotland, and also the subsidy system. That will create a fair level playing field between us and the Scots.
Question 8, Paul Davis.
Will the First Minister make a statement what the Welsh Government is doing to improve health services in West Wales?
Well, the Welsh Government is supporting local health boards to deliver safe, high-quality care for patients in West Wales.
It's clear, First Minister, that the closure or downgrading of services does have an impact on other services within hospitals, and we've seen this at Weinidogion Hospital recently, where your government has decided to close the special baby care unit. Now there are plans to downgrade the paediatrics, and I'm sure that the decision to downgrade the paediatric department will have a negative impact on the A&E department, and forcing children and adults to travel further for an A&E services will put lives at risk. And bearing in mind that it's clear now that the hospital is being downgraded, can you, First Minister, commit to ensuring that the Health Minister will make a full statement on the future of Weinidogion Hospital as soon as possible?
Well, may I say in the first place that there is no problem as regards the future of Weinidogion Hospital as a general district hospital. But as regards what the member said, and I've said this a number of times, of course, he states that a decision has been taken by the Minister without considering the fact, of course, that this is a decision that has been taken on doctors' recommendations. And so if the Minister is not right, then all the doctors aren't right either, namely the obstetric doctors in Wales, the experts on the panel, all of those must be wrong too. Well, I don't believe that any sensible and wise minister can avoid a recommendation made to him as minister that says you have to make changes in order to ensure that the service is safe and sustainable, and that is exactly what the recommendation was. And the reality is the choice is Glangwili or Weinidogion. You can't have both as level 2 units. So what you have to consider is where should that unit be located. The problem in Pembrokeshire is that there aren't sufficient number of births taking place in order to secure a level 2 unit. That is not the government's view, it's the view of the doctors and the Royal College's view. And as regards any risk to life, we don't accept that. And can I tell you why? When I saw what happened in the case of Kate Sutton, and I understand the timing, but this is important, presiding officer, I asked the Chief General Medical Officer to consider what the position was to see whether any changes to Weinidogion would endanger somebody like her in the future, and the answer was no, because of the fact that her case was an A&E case, and it would still be right for somebody like herself to have treatment in Weinidogion, whatever the decision was. We cannot accept that the situation as regards the changes that have been made by the Minister will put people like her at risk in the future. That is the view of the doctors themselves and not the view of the politicians, and that's the problem. It's fine for politicians to say you can do this and you must do that, but when you have strong recommendations from the doctors themselves saying you have to change, well, what sensible minister is going to ignore that? What would happen to the doctors' insurance? Nobody would insure them. What would happen if somebody were to die? Who would be blamed? It would be the minister and the doctors. It's not as easy. I understand how strong the feelings are running in Pembrokeshire, but it's exceptionally important that people realise what the problems and challenges are And we must ensure that we follow the recommendations in order to make a sensible and safe decision.
Presiding Officer. First Minister, recruitment difficulties have been cited by Hywel Dda UHB as a key reason for the decisions behind the service change in paediatrics, although local people and the CHC have questioned this. Will you investigate the circumstances around the failed attempts to recruit to paediatric posts so that we can be satisfied that all efforts have indeed been made to appoint people to those positions?
Yes, I can tell the member that Hywel Dda has experienced continued difficulties in recruiting paediatric consultants in Pembrokeshire for some time. One post has remained vacant despite being advertised for over a year, and the job description having been rewritten to make the post more attractive. At middle grade level, there have been successive vacancies in Carmarthenshire and Pembrokeshire. Part of this is because both those hospitals rely heavily on recruitment from the EU and outside. Heavily. They weren't able to recruit from outside the EU. They have enormous problems in terms of recruitment. The difficulty is that those people who come quite often move on very quickly. They move to more urban areas very, very quickly. They don't tend to stay. Some clearly do. And so that is the reality of what Hywel Dda had to try and deal with. They did undertake a recruitment drive within the EU, but they weren't able to fill all the posts that they needed to as a result of that recruitment drive. What I can say is, however, that additional vacancies will be created in Withybush at junior doctor level when the paediatric training rota is centralised. Again, what the college said was that it wasn't possible to have paediatric training at two sites separately. They wouldn't back it. At the deanery, I beg your pardon, they wouldn't back that situation. So Hywel Dda on this occasion certainly have tried to recruit people into those posts, but unfortunately it's proven difficult. It is a historic problem, but nevertheless I'm sure they will continue to make sure that that they look to recruit further in the future.
Peter Black.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Minister, First Minister, as you know, many patients from West Wales use hospitals in the ABMU area, and I attended a meeting last week along with Bethan Jenkins regarding a number of patients in that meeting whose families and relatives are very unhappy about their treatment. There was over 100 people there. And those relatives felt very strongly that the current inquiries into ABMU and what has gone on in particular in Princess of Wales Hospital were not sufficient to meet their needs to have a proper investigation of their complaints. And they would like to see a public inquiry looking at this particular health board. Will you consider extending the current investigation into ABMU into a public inquiry to try to meet the concerns of those relatives and friends of patients who have suffered as a result of bad treatment in those hospitals?
First of all, it's important that there is an investigation, and that is happening, of course. The Health Ministers already said that, not only in terms of current practice, but as he said very clearly, in terms of historic practice as well. And the independent investigator is able to look at whatever they want to in terms of what report that they wish to produce. In terms of, my belief is that has to be given the opportunity to report first of all. The second point is that a public inquiry, you get £1 million for a public inquiry, that's a substantial financial commitment. At this stage, that wouldn't be appropriate, having already, of course, stated there is an ongoing independent investigation. I understand the Chief Nursing Officer met with a group, I think this morning or yesterday, to discuss their views, and I believe the meeting was a constructive one. But I do think we need to make sure that the investigation does take its course, and then, of course, it will be a matter for those who are aggrieved to see that report and then decide what their view is of that report. But changing horses halfway through at this stage wouldn't seem to me to make sense.
Thank you, First Minister.